My husband looked me dead in the eyes and called me a worthless loser. He said it in front of his mistress, in front of his mother, in front of a room full of lawyers who were about to take everything I had. His mistress was wearing the diamond bracelet I
Closely
had
at this
begged him
amortization
for on our
schedule.
anniversary.
If we refile Chapter 11,
The
we can
one he
protect the
said was
assets.
too
I
expensive,
understand. We proceed as
too
planned.
impractical,
Wait,
too
look
much
at this.
for someone like
the
me.
shell company transfers
I
match
signed the divorce
exact
papers
amounts
that
missing
day.
from the bank records.
$50,000
We
and a
finally have
used
them.
Honda. That was the price tag on 5 years of my
I
life.
think you'll find this
They
evidence
laughed
quite
as I
compelling,
walked out.
Mr. Cole.
His mother
It
said
details
finally,
everything the board
"We can
needs
get back
know."
to normal." His mistress suggested I apply for a job at the mall. I was broken, homeless, alone. What they did not know was that their cruelty had just awakened something inside me they could never have imagined. 3 years later, I walked back into their lives. But this time, I was not the woman they had thrown away like garbage. I was the woman who was about to take everything they had ever built. This is my story, the story of how I went from worthless loser to the most powerful woman they had ever underestimated. Stay until the end, because the revenge I got was sweeter than anything you have ever heard. Value statement. What you will learn from this story. This is not just entertainment. This is a blueprint. You will learn how to protect yourself financially before disaster strikes. You will learn the warning signs of manipulation that most women miss. You will learn why documenting everything could save your life someday. And most importantly, you will learn that your worth is never determined by how someone else treats you. Meaning of the story. The deeper message: every woman who has ever been made to feel small, every woman who has been told she is not enough, every woman who has signed away her dreams because someone convinced her she did not deserve them. This story is for you. Elena's journey proves one truth that powerful people never want you to understand. They can take your money, they can take your reputation, they can take your dignity, but they cannot take your ability to rebuild. They cannot take your determination. They cannot take the fire that burns inside you when you finally decide that enough is enough. The people who call you worthless are not describing who you are. They are revealing who they are. And the best revenge is not destruction. The best revenge is becoming everything they said you could not be. I stood in the lobby of Cole Enterprises wearing a dress that cost more than my first car. The security guard smiled at me, not recognizing me as the woman who used to enter through the side door. The one reserved for wives who did not matter. My husband called me worthless in front of his mistress, his mother, and a room full of lawyers. They laughed while I signed away my marriage for $50,000 and a used Honda. What none of them knew was that I had spent 3 years secretly building a company worth more than his entire empire. And I was about to take everything. But I am getting ahead of myself. To understand how I became this woman, you need to understand who I was before. You need to understand the girl who believed love could save her from a life she was desperate to escape. 5 years ago, I was Elena Ward, a 29-year-old corporate accountant working for a mid-sized firm in Boston. I grew up poor in rural Kentucky, the kind of poor where you celebrate when the electricity stays on for a whole month, the kind of poor where Christmas dinner is whatever the church food bank had left over, the kind of poor that leaves marks on your soul that never quite fade, no matter how many zeros end up in your bank account. My father left when I was 7, just walked out one morning and never came back. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed, and I learned early that the only person you could rely on was yourself. I put myself through college on scholarships and determination, studying until my eyes burned and my hands cramped, graduating summa cum laude with a degree in accounting and a minor in art history. Numbers fed my bank account. Art fed my soul. I always believed both were necessary for a complete life. I met Marcus Cole at a charity gala. I had no business attending. My firm had donated money for a table, and my boss gave me her ticket because her daughter had a dance recital. I almost did not go. I stood in my tiny apartment for 20 minutes, staring at the invitation, telling myself I would not fit in with those people. But something made me go anyway. Call it fate. Call it destiny. Call it the worst decision of my life. I wore a dress I bought at a consignment shop, a deep blue gown that had probably cost someone else $2,000, but only cost me $60. My shoes pinched my toes, and my clutch was from Target, but I held my head high as I walked into that ballroom. The room was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers, waiters carrying champagne that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, women dripping in diamonds, and men who looked like they had never worried about anything in their entire lives. I felt like a fraud, like someone would tap me on the shoulder any moment and ask to see my credentials. So I did what I always did when I felt out of place. I found the art. There was a small watercolor tucked away near the coat check, a piece that nobody else seemed to notice. It depicted a woman standing at a window, looking out at a storm, her back to the viewer. Something about it spoke to me, the loneliness, the quiet strength, the sense of waiting for something that might never come. I was so absorbed in studying it that I did not hear him approach. A voice behind me said the artist was undervalued. I turned and saw him for the first time, tall, over 6 feet, with dark hair silvering at the temples in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. A jaw that could have been carved from marble, eyes the color of expensive whiskey. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car, and he held himself with the casual confidence of someone who had never been told no. Marcus Cole, 40 years old, real estate developer, worth somewhere north of $500 million. I did not know any of that then. I just saw a handsome man who had noticed the same painting I had. I told him the artist was not undervalued. I said people just did not know how to look. I said this piece was about isolation and resilience, about finding strength in solitude, and most people were too busy looking for pretty landscapes to see what was really there. He smiled, and something in my chest cracked open. He introduced himself, and I introduced myself, and then we started talking. About the painting, about art, about why people collected things, and what it meant to find beauty in unexpected places. He asked about my work, and I told him about being an accountant, expecting his eyes to glaze over the way most people's did. Instead, he asked follow-up questions. He wanted to know what I found interesting about numbers. What drew me to a career most people found boring. I told him that numbers told stories. I said every financial statement was a narrative, and if you knew how to read it, you could learn more about a person or a company than any biography could tell you. I said I loved the puzzle of it, finding the truth hidden in the data. He looked at me like I had said something profound. We talked for 3 hours. He asked about my dreams, and I told him about wanting to open my own gallery someday, a space dedicated to undervalued artists like the one who had painted the watercolor. He asked about my thesis on contemporary artists reshaping the American art landscape, and he actually listened to my answer. He told me about his business, about building things that would outlast him, about the satisfaction of seeing a skyline change because of something he created. He talked about his father, who had started Cole Properties with nothing and built it into an empire. He talked about wanting to make his father proud. When the gala ended, he asked for my number. I gave it to him with hands that trembled. He called the next day, and the day after that, and every day for 3 weeks. We went to museums and galleries. We went to hole-in-the-wall restaurants where the food was amazing and the decor was terrible. We went for walks along the harbor at midnight, talking about everything and nothing. He made me feel seen in a way I had never experienced before. He made me feel like every word I said mattered, like every thought I had was worth hearing. He made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I deserved good things. 6 months later, he proposed. We were in Paris, because of course we were in Paris. He had taken me there for my birthday, and we were standing on a bridge over the Seine as the sun set behind the Eiffel Tower. He got down on one knee and pulled out a ring with a diamond so large I was afraid to wear it on the subway. Marcus said I was the most remarkable woman he had ever met. He said I challenged him, inspired him, made him want to be better. He said he wanted to build a life with me, a real partnership between equals. He said he could not imagine his future without me in it. I said yes before he finished speaking. I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why a billionaire had chosen a nobody accountant from Kentucky. I should have looked closer at the man who seemed too perfect to be real. But I was in love, and love makes you stupid. The wedding was everything little girls dream about, even little girls who grew up eating church food bank leftovers for Christmas dinner. 200 guests at a venue overlooking the harbor, flowers flown in from Holland, a dress that made me feel like a princess for the first and only time in my life. My mother cried through the entire ceremony. She kept whispering that her baby girl had made it out, that all those years of struggle had been worth it, that she always knew I was destined for something special. My best friend Rachel squeezed my hand during the reception and told me I deserved this. She said she had never seen me so happy. I thought I did deserve it. I thought I was happy. I thought wrong. Moving into the Cole mansion felt like stepping into a different world. 8 bedrooms, an indoor pool, a wine cellar that could have housed my entire childhood apartment, a kitchen bigger than the trailer I grew up in. Staff who called me Mrs. Cole with respect I had not earned, and deference I did not understand. I wandered through those endless rooms for days, trying to find a place that felt like mine. Everything was decorated in Victoria's taste, all cream colors and antiques and fresh flowers that someone replaced every morning. It was beautiful and cold and utterly impersonal. Marcus's mother, Victoria, lived in the guest house on the property. That should have been my first warning. Victoria Cole was old money, the kind of woman who could make you feel poor just by the way she held her teacup. She was 63 when I met her, elegant and sharp and ruthlessly polished. Her hair was silver and perfect. Her clothes were understated and expensive. Her smile never quite reached her eyes. She had opinions about everything I did. My clothes were too casual. She suggested I visit her personal shopper, who could help me find pieces more appropriate for my new station. She said it sweetly, with a smile, but the message was clear. What you are wearing is not good enough. My accent was too country. She recommended a speech coach who worked with executives, someone who could help me sound more refined. She said it gently, like she was doing me a favor, but I heard what she really meant. The way you talk marks you as inferior. My suggestions for the charity foundation were too urban. That was her word, urban. We both knew what she really meant. She shot down every idea I proposed, always with a reasonable explanation, always with plausible deniability, always leaving me wondering if I was being oversensitive. But I loved Marcus, and I told myself his mother would warm up to me eventually. I told myself I just needed to try harder, be better, prove I belonged in their world. I told myself love was enough to overcome any obstacle. The first year of marriage was beautiful despite Victoria's coldness. Marcus surprised me with weekend trips to Paris, to Rome, to a private island in the Caribbean. He bought me jewelry for no reason, pieces from Tiffany's and Cartier that I was terrified to wear. He left love notes on my pillow and brought me breakfast in bed on Sunday mornings. We stayed up late talking about our future. He said he wanted children, at least 2, maybe 3. He said he wanted them to have siblings so they would never be lonely, the way he had been as an only child. He said he could not wait to teach them to play catch, to read them bedtime stories, to watch them grow into the people they were meant to be. He asked about my gallery, and I told him about my vision, a space dedicated to artists who had been overlooked, who had something important to say, but no platform to say it. He said it sounded wonderful. He said we had time for both the children and the gallery. He said he would support my dreams the way I supported his. I believed him. I believed every word he said. Year 2, things shifted. His business was expanding into commercial real estate, bigger deals requiring longer hours. Those romantic dinners became rushed takeout eaten over spreadsheets at midnight. The weekend trips stopped because there was always a crisis, always a deal that could not wait, always something more important than us. He was constantly on his phone, constantly stressed, constantly somewhere else, even when he was sitting right next to me. We would be at dinner, and his eyes would be on his screen, his mind 1,000 miles away. I would be talking, and realize he had not heard a word I said. I told myself this was normal. This was what successful marriages look like. This was what partnership meant. You sacrifice for the people you love. I stopped suggesting trips because I knew he would say he was too busy. I stopped planning romantic dinners because I knew he would cancel at the last minute. I stopped expecting him to be present because it hurt too much when he was not. By year 3, we had separate bedrooms. He said it was because his conference calls started at 5 in the morning and he did not want to wake me. He said it was temporary, just until the hotel development deal closed. He said it had nothing to do with us, nothing to do with how he felt about me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe there was a reason that made sense, a logical explanation for why my husband no longer wanted to sleep beside me. I decorated my room with artwork I had been collecting, pieces from artists Victoria, called Pedestrian and Common. I hung a painting by an unknown artist from Detroit, a vibrant abstract that made me feel alive every time I looked at it. I displayed sculptures I had found at small galleries, pieces that spoke to me even though they would never be worth anything. I turned that room into my own space, a refuge, a place where I could be Elena Ward instead of Mrs. Marcus Cole. I pretended it did not hurt to sleep alone in a mansion full of empty rooms. My own career had stopped completely by then. Every time I mentioned going back to work or starting my gallery, Marcus had a reason why it was not the right time. The business was at a critical juncture, and he needed me available for investor dinners. Victoria was planning the annual charity gala and needed my help. We were trying to get pregnant, and he thought I should focus on that. We were not trying to get pregnant. We had not been intimate in months. But I did not point that out because I did not want to have that conversation. There was always something more important than my dreams, always some reason why I should wait, be patient, put my ambitions on hold for just a little longer. I started to feel like a very expensive decoration in his very expensive life, something to be displayed at parties, trotted out when important clients came to dinner, and then put away when no longer needed. Then I started noticing things. Perfume on his shirts that was not mine, a leather and musk scent, something bold and aggressive that I would never wear. I would do his laundry sometimes, when the staff had days off, and I would catch that smell and feel my stomach turn. Credit card statements left on his desk showing jewelry purchases from stores I had never visited, flowers from the premium florist downtown, the one that charged $200 for a bouquet. I never received any jewelry beyond that first year. I never got any flowers. When I asked about it, Marcus sighed, the way he always did when I brought up something he did not want to discuss. He said they were client gifts, business expenses, a way of maintaining relationships with important partners. He looked at me with those whiskey-colored eyes and asked why I was being so paranoid. He asked if I really thought he would do something like that. He asked what he had ever done to make me doubt him. I apologized. I told him I was being silly. I told myself I was being oversensitive, seeing problems where none existed. Rachel tried to warn me. She called one Tuesday afternoon, her voice careful the way it gets when she is about to say something I do not want to hear. Rachel said she had seen Marcus at the new Italian restaurant downtown with a woman, a blonde woman in a red dress, sitting close, laughing loud. Rachel said she was not trying to start trouble. She said maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a business dinner. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation, but she thought I should know. I defended him. I said it was a business dinner, that he had mentioned having client meetings that week. I said Rachel must have misread the situation, that Marcus would never do something like that. Rachel went quiet for a moment. Then she said, okay, in a voice that meant it was not okay at all. She said she was sorry for bringing it up. She said if I ever needed anything, she was there. I thanked her and hung up and told myself she was wrong. I was not ready to hear it. I was not ready to let my fairy tale die. The woman's name was Jessica Manning. I found out by accident 2 weeks after Rachel's phone call. Marcus had left for a meeting, and I needed to check my email. My laptop was updating, so I used his. His messages were still open. I told myself I would not read them. I told myself I trusted my husband. I told myself snooping was wrong and paranoid and exactly the kind of behavior he had accused me of. Then I saw her name, Jessica Manning, real estate attorney. The subject line said last night. I clicked on it before I could stop myself. The email was professional on the surface. A discussion of contract terms, a mention of a property deal, a reference to documents that needed review. But there was something underneath, an intimacy in the tone that did not fit a business relationship. She had written looking forward to our next meeting, and she had added a winky face. She had mentioned that the wine at dinner had been excellent, even better than last time. She had signed it with just her first initial, J, like they were close enough that her full name was unnecessary. I went back through his inbox. I found dozens of emails from her, stretching back months. Most were business-related, but some were not. Inside jokes I did not understand. References to dinners and drinks and late nights at the office. One email mentioned that she loved the earrings. She said they were perfect, and she would wear them for him on Thursday. I had never received earrings. Marcus had not given me jewelry in over a year. I closed the laptop and sat very still for a long time. That night, I told Marcus I was visiting Rachel. Instead, I drove downtown. I did not have a plan. I just needed to know. The Italian restaurant was on a quiet street in the Back Bay, the kind of place where a meal cost $300 and the wait list was a month long. I parked across the street and told myself I was being crazy. Then I saw them through the window. They were sitting at a corner table, heads close together, laughing at something. She was blonde and beautiful, with sharp features and confident posture. She was wearing a red dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, and she was wearing diamond earrings that sparkled in the candlelight. She touched his arm when she laughed. He leaned in when she spoke. The way they looked at each other was unmistakable. This was not a business dinner. This was not two colleagues discussing contracts. This was my husband with another woman. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching them through that window. I watched her reach across the table to adjust his tie. I watched him pour her wine with the same attentiveness he had shown me during our first dates. I watched something inside me crack beyond repair. I drove home in a daze. I do not remember the route I took. I just remember walking into that cold, beautiful mansion and standing in the foyer, wondering how my life had become this. I confronted Marcus that night. I walked into his bedroom at midnight, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My hands were shaking. My voice wanted to break, but I forced it to stay steady. I asked him who Jessica Manning was. He did not even look surprised. He just sighed. The way you sigh when a child asks a question you find tedious. He set down the document he was reading and looked at me with an expression of patient annoyance. Marcus said she was a colleague. He said they worked together on property deals, and sometimes that required dinner meetings. He asked why I was asking. I told him I had seen them through the restaurant window. I told him I had seen the way she touched him. I told him I had read his emails. That was when he got angry. Actually angry at me. He said I had no right to read his private correspondence. He said I was insecure and paranoid and jealous. He said this was exactly why he had not told me about Jessica, because he knew I would overreact. He said successful men have business dinners with attractive colleagues. He said if I could not handle that, maybe I was not cut out to be married to someone at his level. At his level. Like I was beneath him. Like I had always been beneath him. He asked what I expected him to do. Never speak to another woman? Never have dinner with a client? Never build the relationships that made his business successful? He told me I was embarrassing myself. He told me I needed to get my emotions under control. He told me to leave his room because he had an early meeting. I stood there with tears running down my face, and I apologized. I apologized to my husband for catching him with another woman. That is what he had done to me. That is who I had become. A woman so desperate to believe in her fairy tale that she would apologize for her own betrayal. I cried myself to sleep that night in my separate bedroom, in my separate life. I told myself he was right. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself the problem was me, just like he said. I believed it. Or I made myself believe it because the alternative was too painful. 3 months passed. I tried to be a better wife. I hosted his dinners with a smile plastered on my face. I attended his events on his arm, wearing clothes Victoria approved of and saying things Marcus had coached me to say. I stopped asking questions about Jessica. I stopped checking his phone. I stopped looking for evidence of what I already knew was true. I told myself if I was good enough, perfect enough, accommodating enough, he would love me again. I told myself I could win him back if I just tried harder. Then Victoria invited me to brunch. The invitation was unusual because Victoria barely spoke to me unless she was criticizing something. She called personally on a Wednesday evening. Her voice was pleasant, almost warm, which immediately made me suspicious. Victoria said we needed to have a family discussion. She said there were some things that required my attention. She wanted me to come to the main house on Sunday at 11. She said Marcus would be there. Something about her tone made me nervous, but I told myself this might be good. Maybe she had finally noticed that Marcus and I were struggling. Maybe she wanted to help us work through our problems. Maybe she was finally ready to accept me as part of the family. I spent an hour getting ready that Sunday. I chose my outfit carefully, a cream-colored dress Marcus had bought me in Paris during our first year. It was elegant and understated, and Victoria had once said it made me look almost refined. I did my makeup the way Victoria preferred, subtle and polished. I styled my hair in the low chignon she had suggested months ago. I wanted to look like I belonged in that family, like I was worthy of the Cole name. I arrived at exactly 11, not a minute early or late, the way Victoria preferred. Punctuality was a virtue she valued, one of the few things about me she had ever praised. Marcus's car was in the driveway. So was another car I did not recognize, a white Mercedes convertible with vanity plates that spelled out Jess M. My hands started shaking as I walked to the door. I told myself it could be anyone. I told myself there were lots of people with those initials. I told myself I was being paranoid again, just like Marcus said. Victoria opened the door before I could knock. She was wearing pearls and a cream-colored suit and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She looked at me the way you might look at a stain on an expensive carpet, something unfortunate that needed to be dealt with. Victoria said she was glad I could make it. She said everyone was waiting in the living room. She led me through the house without saying another word. Her heels clicked on the marble floors. The sound echoed in the silence. The living room was Victoria's pride. Antique furniture, fresh flowers, oil paintings of coal ancestors staring down from the walls. It was designed to intimidate, and it had always worked on me. Marcus was sitting on the sofa. He did not look at me when I entered, and next to him, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, was Jessica Manning. She was even more beautiful up close. Perfect blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, a smile that managed to be both charming and cruel. She was wearing a diamond bracelet on her wrist, and I recognized it immediately. It was the same bracelet I had shown Marcus 6 months ago when we walked past Tiffany's. I had stopped at the window, admiring the way it caught the light. I had said it would be perfect for our anniversary. He had said it was too flashy, too impractical, too expensive for something that would just sit in a jewelry box. Now it was on another woman's wrist. I stopped in the doorway. My brain could not process what I was seeing. This was not a family discussion. This was an ambush. Victoria gestured to a chair across from them, positioned so that I would be facing all three of them at once. Victoria told me to sit down. I sat because I did not know what else to do. My legs were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. Victoria started talking. Her voice was calm and measured, like she was discussing the weather or the stock market or anything other than the destruction of my entire life. She said Marcus had been unhappy for a long time. She said he had been too kind, too patient, trying to make things work with someone who was never suited to their lifestyle. She said he had given me every opportunity to prove myself, and I had failed. She said he had finally found someone who understood his world, his ambitions, his needs. Then she said Marcus wanted a divorce. The word hit me like a physical blow. Divorce. After everything I had sacrificed, after everything I had given up, after 5 years of trying to be the wife he wanted, the daughter-in-law Victoria demanded, the woman I thought I needed to become. I looked at Marcus. I waited for him to say something, to explain, to tell his mother she was wrong. I waited for him to look at me with those whiskey-colored eyes and tell me this was a misunderstanding. He just stared at his hands. I asked him if this was true. My voice sounded small and far away, like it belonged to someone else. I asked him if this was really what he wanted. That was when he looked up at me. His eyes were cold, empty, like he was looking at a stranger. Like 5 years of marriage meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. Marcus said I was a worthless loser who brought nothing to this marriage. The words hit me one by one. Worthless, loser, nothing. He kept talking. He said I was boring. He said I was basic. He said I embarrassed him at events with my country accent and my cheap tastes and my pathetic attempts to fit into a world where I did not belong. He said I did not understand his business. He said I did not support his ambitions. He said I was holding him back from his full potential. He said he should never have married me in the first place. Victoria nodded like he had said something wise. She added that I was common, that I never quite fit into their social circle, that she had tried to help me, but some people just did not have the breeding for this level of society. She said the word breeding like it meant something scientific, like I was a dog with inferior genetics, rather than a human being sitting 3 feet away from her. Jessica was smiling, actually smiling, with perfect white teeth and genuine amusement. Jessica looked at me and said, "No hard feelings, sweetie." She said, I had tried my best. Then she laughed, a bright tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. She suggested maybe I could get a job at Bloomingdale's or something. She said it would be good for me to learn what real work feels like. I sat there with tears running down my face while the three of them took turns destroying me. They passed my failures back and forth like a ball, each one adding a new criticism, a new insult, a new reason why I was not good enough and never had been. Victoria said she expected me to return all the gifts they had given me over the years. The jewelry, the clothes, even the artwork Marcus had bought me. She said those items were meant for a Cole wife, and soon I would not be one. Jessica touched the diamond bracelet on her wrist and suggested I hurry up and move out because she was tired of waiting to redecorate. She called my taste pedestrian. Their lawyer slid papers across the table. He pointed to the signature lines. He explained the terms of the settlement with the bored efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. $50,000. My old Honda. A confidentiality agreement that would prevent me from ever speaking about the family or their business. Marcus said I should be grateful. He said I did not deserve even that. I stared at the papers. The words blurred through my tears. Victoria said she had one more thing. She pulled out an envelope and spread photographs across the table. The photo showed me with a man I did not recognize at places I had never been. A hotel lobby, a restaurant, a parked car. In each one, we appeared intimate, close, romantic. Victoria said these proved I had been unfaithful during the marriage. She said if I contested the divorce, if I asked for more money, if I caused any trouble at all, these photos would be released to the media. I told her they were fake. I told her I had never seen that man before in my life. Victoria smiled. She said it did not matter whether they were real or fake. What mattered was what people would believe. She asked who the public would trust. A respected family with generations of history in this city, or a nobody from Kentucky who had married above her station and was now being discarded. I looked at Marcus. I waited for him to say something, to defend me, to acknowledge that he knew these photos were fabricated. He looked away. I signed the papers. I signed away 5 years of my life for $50,000 and a car that barely ran. I signed because I was broken, because I believed I was worthless, because I did not have the strength to fight. I walked out of that house with tears streaming down my face. Behind me, I heard Jessica laugh. I heard Victoria say, finally, "We can get back to normal." I drove 3 blocks, pulled over, and fell apart completely. I moved into Rachel's spare bedroom that night. She took one look at my face when I showed up on her doorstep and pulled me inside without asking questions. She wrapped me in a blanket, made me tea, and sat with me while I cried until I had nothing left. Rachel said I could stay as long as I needed. She said whatever happened, we would figure it out together. When I could finally speak, I told her everything. About the ambush, about the photographs, about the $50,000 settlement I had signed away 5 years for, about being called worthless and common and pedestrian by people who had never worked a real job in their lives. Rachel listened without interrupting. Her face went through a dozen expressions, anger and sympathy and outrage and love, but she did not speak until I finished. Then she said one sentence that planted a seed I did not know would grow into something powerful. Rachel said they are going to regret this. I did not believe her. In that moment, I could not imagine ever feeling anything but broken. 2 weeks later, I discovered I was pregnant. I stared at the test for 20 minutes, convinced I was seeing things. But the second test said the same thing. And the third. I was carrying Marcus Cole's baby. The baby we had talked about during those first years, before everything went wrong. The baby he said he wanted when he still pretended to love me. I sat on the bathroom floor of Rachel's apartment and did not know what to feel. Joy? Terror? Hope? All of them swirled together until I could not separate one from another. Part of me wanted to call him, to tell him, and watch his face when he realized what he had thrown away. Part of me wanted to march back into that living room and announce to Victoria and Jessica that I was carrying the Cole heir. But then, I imagined Victoria's reaction. The accusations that I had gotten pregnant on purpose to trap him. The demands for paternity tests. The lawyers and the media and the endless, exhausting battle. I imagined my child growing up in that family, learning to be cold and cruel and dismissive, learning that money mattered more than love, that status mattered more than kindness. I decided to keep it to myself. I would raise this child alone, away from that toxic family. My baby would never know what it felt like to be called worthless. I started making plans. I looked for apartments I could afford on $50,000. I updated my resume for the first time in years. I researched prenatal care and childbirth classes and everything else a single mother needed to know. For the first time since that terrible Sunday, I had something to live for. 3 weeks later, I woke up in a pool of blood. The pain hit me first, sharp and terrible, like something inside me was tearing apart. Then I saw the red spreading across the white sheets, and I screamed. Rachel came running. She took one look and called 911. She held my hand in the ambulance, telling me to stay calm, telling me everything would be okay. But we both knew it would not be okay. The doctors said it was not my fault. They said miscarriages happened in the first trimester, especially when the mother was under extreme stress. They said there was nothing I could have done differently, nothing that would have changed the outcome. But I knew whose fault it was. I lay in that hospital bed for 2 days. I did not eat. I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling and felt something inside me die, my baby. The one good thing that might have come from my failed marriage, gone before it ever had a chance to live. On the second night, Rachel came to visit. She sat beside my bed and held my hand and did not say anything for a long time. Then, she told me something her grandmother used to say. She said, "Grief is love with nowhere to go." I thought about that. I thought about all the love I had poured into my marriage, into the dream of a family, into the hope of a future that would never exist. And I realized Rachel's grandmother was right. But she was also wrong. Grief was love with nowhere to go. But love could become something else. It could become fuel. It could become fire. It could become revenge. On the third day, I asked Rachel to bring me my laptop. Rachel asked what I was doing. I looked at her with eyes that felt different, harder, colder than they had been before. I said I was going to destroy them, all of them, and I was going to do it legally, systematically, and completely. Rachel looked at me for a long moment, then she smiled. Rachel said that was the Elena she remembered. I started with what I knew best: numbers. During my marriage, I had access to Marcus's home office. He never thought twice about leaving documents on his desk because he never considered me a threat. Why would he? I was just his worthless wife who did not understand his business. But I understood numbers better than anyone he had ever met. And I had seen things during those years. Inconsistencies in his financial reports. Shell companies with no apparent purpose. Money moving between accounts in ways that did not make sense. I had not questioned it then because I was trying to be a good wife. I was trying not to be paranoid and oversensitive, just like he told me. Now I started writing down everything I remembered: dates, account numbers, company names, transaction amounts. My photographic memory, the one Marcus had called weird and obsessive, turned out to be a weapon I did not know I possessed. I filled notebook after notebook with details: numbers I had glimpsed on spreadsheets, names I had seen on contracts, conversations I had overheard when Marcus thought I was not paying attention. But I knew that memories were not evidence. I needed to learn how to turn what I knew into something that could actually hurt them. 6 weeks after the divorce, I walked into a support group for divorced women. I told myself I was there for emotional healing. In reality, I did not know where else to go. My former colleagues had stopped returning my calls. My social circle, such as it was, had been entirely composed of Marcus's friends and associates. I had no one except Rachel, and I could not put the entire weight of my broken life on her shoulders. The support group met in the basement of a church in Somerville. 12 women sitting in a circle, sharing stories of husbands who had left them, cheated on them, taken everything they had. I listened more than I spoke that first night. I heard stories that made my own situation seem almost mild. Women who had been beaten, women whose husbands had hidden all their assets in offshore accounts, women who had been left homeless with children to feed. It made me realize something important. I was not alone. There were thousands of women like me, women who had been discarded by men who saw them as disposable. After the meeting, I stood in the parking lot, trying to remember where I had parked. My mind was somewhere else entirely, processing everything I had heard. A voice behind me said, "You look lost." I turned and saw a woman in her late 50s, silver hair cut short, glasses that made her look like a librarian who could kill you. She was wearing a sensible pantsuit and carrying a briefcase, and something about her posture commanded attention. Her name was Diane Crawford. She said she had noticed me during the meeting. She said I had the look of someone who was planning something, not just grieving. I asked her what she meant. Diane said most women in that room were trying to survive. They were focused on getting through the next day, the next week, the next month. But I looked like I was building something. She said she recognized that look because she had worn it herself once. I asked her who she was. Diane said she used to be an FBI forensic accountant. 30 years of tracking money through shell companies, offshore accounts, and criminal enterprises. She had helped bring down mob bosses, corrupt politicians, and corporate fraudsters. Now she was retired. She ran a small consulting firm that specialized in helping women uncover hidden assets during divorces. And she was looking for a protege. I told her about Marcus, about the financial inconsistencies I had noticed, about my suspicions that he was hiding something bigger than an affair. Diane's eyes sharpened. She asked if I could remember specific numbers, specific documents, specific transactions. I closed my eyes and started reciting everything I had seen. Dates and amounts and account numbers poured out of me. Details I did not know I had memorized until they were coming out of my mouth. When I finished, Diane was smiling. She said most people thought forensic accounting was boring, following paper trails, analyzing spreadsheets, looking for patterns in endless columns of numbers. She said they were wrong. Forensic accounting was detective work. It was puzzle solving. It was finding the truth that powerful people tried to bury. She said she was going to teach me everything she knew, and in 6 months, I would know exactly how to take apart every empire Marcus Cole had ever built. She was right. Diane became my mentor, my teacher, and eventually my business partner. We met 3 times a week at her office, a small space above a dry cleaner that smelled like chemicals and determination. She had whiteboards covered in diagrams, filing cabinets full of case studies, and a coffee maker that produced the strongest brew I had ever tasted. She started with the basics: how money moved through the financial system, how shell companies worked, how criminals hid assets, and how investigators found them. She taught me to read between the lines of financial statements, to spot the red flags that indicated fraud or deception. She taught me about offshore accounts in the Caymans, in Switzerland, and Delaware. She taught me about nominee directors and beneficial ownership and the dozen other tricks rich people used to hide their wealth. She gave me homework, case studies, from her FBI days, names and details redacted, but the methods preserved. I spent my nights analyzing transactions, following money through Byzantine networks, learning to think like the people I wanted to catch. And she taught me the most important lesson of all. Diane said the best revenge was not destruction. It was success. She said I should not just take Marcus down. I should build myself up so high that he could never reach me again. She told me about her own experience. 30 years ago, she had been divorced by a man who thought she was nothing more than a housewife with a calculator. He had hidden assets, lied to the court, and left her with almost nothing. She had rebuilt herself from the ground up. She had joined the FBI, risen through the ranks, and eventually testified against her ex-husband when his business dealings caught federal attention. Diane said he was still in prison. She said she sent him a Christmas card every year. I told her I wanted to do the same thing. Not the Christmas card part, but the rest of it. I wanted to build something that would outlast my anger. Something that would help other women the way she was helping me. Diane smiled. She said she had been hoping I would say that. Using my settlement money, we started a small forensic accounting consultancy. Just the two of us at first, working out of her cramped office. We took any case that came our way, mostly divorce cases where women suspected their husbands were hiding assets. I was good at it, really good, because I understood what those women were going through. I understood what it felt like to be dismissed and underestimated and told you were paranoid when you knew something was wrong. Our first big case was a woman named Margaret, whose husband claimed their construction business was worth nothing. She was about to accept a settlement of $50,000, just like I had. I spent 2 weeks following the money. I found hidden accounts in 3 states, property holdings that had been transferred to relatives, and a second set of books that showed the business was worth over $5 million. Margaret got half of everything. She sent me flowers and a note that said I had saved her life. Word spread. Other women called. Then lawyers started referring clients. Then we needed to hire employees. Within a year, my firm had 10 employees and a waiting list of clients. Within 2 years, we were one of the top forensic accounting firms in Boston. I moved out of Rachel's spare bedroom and into my own apartment, a nice 2-bedroom, in a building I eventually bought. I wore clothes that made me feel powerful instead of appropriate. I spoke in my Kentucky accent without apologizing. And the whole time, I was building my case against Marcus Cole. I never forgot what they did to me. I never forgot what they took from me. Every document I analyzed, every hidden account I uncovered, every cheating husband I exposed, brought me one step closer to the day I could do the same to the man who had called me worthless. But I needed proof. Real, ironclad, undeniable proof. And after 3 years of building my empire, I was finally about to get my chance to find it. The opportunity came from an unexpected source. I had hired a young investigator named James Bennett who specialized in corporate research. He was 26, hungry, brilliant with computers, and convinced that rich people got away with everything because nobody bothered to look closely enough. He came into my office one morning with a look on his face that I had learned to recognize. It was the look of someone who had found something big. James said he had been digging into coal properties, like I asked. He said there was something strange going on with their development projects. I told him to show me. He spread documents across my desk. Building permits that did not match actual construction costs, subcontractors who did not seem to exist outside of paperwork, money flowing into projects and disappearing into accounts that led nowhere. Marcus was laundering money through his real estate development, millions of dollars, maybe tens of millions, moving through shell companies and fake vendors and construction projects that existed only on paper. I had suspected it for years. Now I had evidence. James asked what we were going to do with this information. I smiled for the first time in weeks. I told him we were going to get more. I knew Marcus's schedule because old habits died hard. I knew he still had dinner with investors every Thursday night, staying out until after midnight. I knew the security codes for his home office because they had not been changed since the divorce. So, on a Thursday night in October, I drove to the house that used to be mine. The mansion looked exactly the same. Same perfectly manicured lawn, same expensive cars in the driveway, same cold, beautiful facade that hid so many ugly secrets. The security system had not changed in 3 years. Marcus was too arrogant to think anyone would dare break into his home, especially his worthless ex-wife. I let myself in through this side door and went straight to his office. The filing cabinet where he kept his most sensitive documents was locked, but the key was still hidden in the same place. Behind the fourth book, on the third shelf, a biography of John D. Rockefeller that Marcus had never actually read. I photographed everything: financial statements, contracts, wire transfer records, correspondence with people whose names I did not recognize, but whose transactions screamed illegal activity. It took 2 hours. My hands were shaking with adrenaline. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure someone would hear it. But no one came. No one suspected. I finally had him. I drove back to my apartment and started organizing the evidence. I called Diane at midnight, breathless with excitement. I told her what I had found. I told her we had everything we needed. Diane was quiet for a long moment. Too long. Then she asked me to send her the documents immediately. I emailed everything, confused by her tone, but too excited to worry. 20 minutes later, she called back. Her voice was different now. Careful. Worried. Diane said these documents were too perfect. I asked her what she meant. Diane said real financial criminals did not keep evidence of their crimes in unlocked filing cabinets. They hid it, encrypted it, destroyed it. These documents were organized, labeled, easy to follow. They laid out Marcus's crimes like a roadmap, like someone wanted them to be found. She said it felt like a trap. I told her she was being paranoid. I told her I had seen these documents during my marriage, that I knew they were real. Diane said she hoped I was right, but something in her voice told me she did not think I was. I should have listened. I contacted a journalist first, a reporter at the Boston Globe who had written about corporate corruption. I gave her the documents and my analysis of what they meant. She was excited. She said this could be a major story, exactly the kind of investigative piece that won awards. A week later, she called me back. Her voice was different now, apologetic, almost afraid. She said she had shown the documents to her editor and the paper's legal team. They had done some checking. She said the documents were fake. I told her that was impossible. I told her I had taken them from Marcus's own office. She said she understood, but the paper could not run a story based on fabricated evidence. She said I should be careful. She said it looked like someone was trying to set me up. That night, I got a call from my lawyer. He said Marcus Cole had filed for a restraining order against me. He said Marcus was claiming I had broken into his home, stolen documents, and was attempting to destroy his business with fabricated evidence. He said the police were investigating. I sat in my apartment and realized what had happened. Jessica Manning. She was a lawyer. She handled Marcus's deals. She knew about his real crimes because she was part of them, and she had set me up. She had planted those documents in his office. Perfect, convincing fakes designed to make me look like a crazy ex-wife trying to frame her former husband. She had probably been waiting for years, knowing eventually I would try something. I had committed a crime to get worthless evidence. I had given them exactly what they needed to destroy me. Diane called me that night. Diane said she was sorry. She said she should have warned me more strongly. Then she said something I have never forgotten. Diane said the worst thing that could happen to a woman fighting powerful people was to become the story instead of the evidence. She said I had made myself the villain in my own narrative. She said if I wanted to beat them, I had to disappear. I had to become invisible again. I had to let them think they had destroyed me, while I figured out how to really take them down. I asked her how long that would take. Diane said, however long it takes. The restraining order was just the beginning. Within a week, 3 catastrophic events destroyed everything I had built. On Monday, I received notice that my business accounts had been frozen. The bank cited suspicious activity, but I knew the real reason. Marcus had connections everywhere. Board members, executives, people who owed him favors or feared his power. One phone call was all it took. Without access to my accounts, I could not pay my employees. I could not pay my rent. I could not pay for anything. I spent the day making frantic phone calls, trying to unfreeze the accounts, trying to explain that there was no suspicious activity, that this was a mistake. No one would help. No one would even return my calls. By evening, I had moved what little I could from my personal savings into cash. It was not much. A few $1,000s, barely enough to survive for a month. That was day 1. On Wednesday, my landlord called. He apologized profusely. He said there was nothing he could do. The building had been purchased by a new owner who was terminating all existing leases, effective immediately. I asked who the new owner was. He said it was a company called Westfield Holdings. I looked it up that night. Westfield Holdings was a subsidiary of a company that was a subsidiary of another company that traced back to Cole Properties. Marcus had bought my building just to throw me out. I had 72 hours to vacate. I packed my belongings in a daze. The artwork I had collected, the books that had kept me company during lonely nights in the mansion. The few pieces of jewelry that were truly mine, gifts from my mother, from Rachel, from the life I had before Marcus Cole. I put everything in storage and checked into a motel. The kind of place that rented by the week and did not ask questions. That was day 3. On Friday, a video appeared online. It showed me at a restaurant 3 weeks earlier, confronting Jessica Manning. I remembered that day. I had seen her having lunch alone, and something in me had snapped. I had walked over to her table, said some things I should not have said, and left before I did anything I would regret. But the video did not show the whole story. It was edited to make me look unhinged. The parts where Jessica smirked and provoked me were cut out. The parts where I walked away calmly were cut out. What remained was 30 seconds of a woman screaming, pointing, looking exactly like the crazy ex-wife Marcus wanted everyone to believe I was. The video went viral. My clients started calling to terminate their contracts. They could not be associated with someone so unstable. My employees started looking for other jobs. My reputation, the one I had spent 3 years building, collapsed in 48 hours. James sent me a text saying he was sorry, but he had to think about his career. He wished me luck. Diane called and said we needed to regroup. She said this was a setback, not an ending. I did not believe her. But the worst part came on Friday night. I was staying at that cheap motel, staring at the water-stained ceiling, trying to figure out what to do next. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. She said someone had thrown a brick through her living room window. She said there was a note attached that said, "Tell your friend to stop digging." She said her twins had been home. They were terrified. They would not stop crying. I drove to her house immediately. Glass was everywhere. Her boys, 8 years old and usually so full of energy, were huddled on the couch with blankets wrapped around them. Rachel looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Fear, real fear. Rachel said she had stood by me through everything. The divorce, the depression, the obsession with revenge. She said she would always love me like a sister. Then she said she could not put her children at risk. I understood. I told her I understood completely. I told her she was doing the right thing. I packed my bag and left that night. I drove to another motel, this one even cheaper than the first. I checked in under a fake name and paid with cash. I sat on the bed with the stained comforter and the broken heater and realized I had lost everything. My business, my home, my best friend, my reputation. Marcus Cole had taken it all without even appearing in person. He had destroyed me with phone calls and shell companies and a 30-second video. I had nothing left. And then I got arrested. The police came the next morning. They said they had received an anonymous tip about drug activity at my motel room. They said they needed to search. I told them to go ahead. I had nothing to hide. They found cocaine in my suitcase, 2 bags of it, hidden in a compartment I did not even know existed. I knew immediately what had happened. Victoria. She had done this. She had sent someone to plant evidence while I was at Rachel's house, probably the same person who had thrown the brick through the window. But knowing something and proving something are different things. They arrested me on possession charges. They handcuffed me in the parking lot while motel guests watched and took pictures with their phones. Another viral moment for the crazy ex-wife of Marcus Cole. I spent 3 days in jail before Diane posted my bail. When I walked out of that building, blinking in the sunlight, I was not the same person who had walked in. Something in me had hardened. The last soft parts, the parts that still hoped for fairness and justice, and the system working the way it was supposed to, those parts were gone. Diane was waiting for me in the parking lot. She did not hug me. She did not offer words of comfort. She just looked at me with those sharp eyes and asked what I wanted to do next. I told her I wanted to win. Diane nodded. She said then we needed to talk about alliances. 2 weeks after I got out of jail, Rachel called. It was the first time we had spoken since the night I left her house. I had given her space, understanding that she needed to protect her children, that my fight was not her fight. Rachel said she was sorry. She said she had been scared and she had let her fear make decisions for her. She said her boys kept asking when Aunt Elena was coming back, and she did not have a good answer. I told her she did not need to apologize. I told her she had done the right thing protecting her family. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said she had done something. She said a man had been coming into the emergency room for the past month, an investigative journalist who had gotten beaten up pretty badly. While she was stitching his face, he had started talking about his work. He was investigating Marcus Cole. Rachel said she had told him about me. She said he wanted to meet. His name was Thomas Reeves. Everyone called him Tommy. He was 38 years old, divorced, shared custody of an 8-year-old daughter named Lily. He worked for an independent investigative news organization that specialized in long-form journalism about powerful people doing terrible things. We met at a coffee shop far from downtown, the kind of place where nobody would recognize either of us. Tommy looked like he had been through hell. His face was still bruised, one eye swollen, cuts healing slowly. He moved carefully, like his ribs hurt, and there was a wariness in him that spoke of recent trauma. But his eyes were sharp and intelligent. And when he looked at me, I did not see pity. I saw respect. Tommy said he had been investigating the Cole family for 18 months. He said Marcus was connected to a network of money laundering, fraud, and possibly worse. He said every time he got close to real evidence, something happened. Sources disappeared, documents vanished. People who promised to talk changed their minds. He said he had been beaten up by men who told him to stop asking questions. He had not stopped. I asked him why. Tommy was quiet for a moment. Then he told me about his daughter, Lily. He said when Lily was 5, her mother had been swindled by a financial advisor who stole her entire savings. The man had connections, money, lawyers. He never faced any consequences. Tommy said he became a journalist because he believed accountability should apply to everyone. He said he kept investigating the Coles because people like them only got away with things when nobody was watching. I asked him what he wanted from me. Tommy said he wanted information. He said I had been inside the Cole family for 5 years. I had seen things, heard things, known things that could help him build a case. I told him I had tried that already. I told him about the fake documents, the setup, the restraining order. I told him about jail and the planted drugs and everything else. Tommy nodded, like he had expected that. Tommy said Jessica Manning was smart. She had anticipated that I might try something, and she had set a trap. But traps only worked once. Now we knew what she was capable of. He said we needed to work together. His investigative skills, my financial expertise, and something else, something we did not have yet. I asked him what that was. Tommy said we needed someone on the inside, someone who knew where the real evidence was hidden, someone who wanted out. I said that was impossible. Everyone in Marcus's circle was loyal or compromised. Tommy smiled, and there was something sad in it. Tommy said nobody was loyal to people like the Coles. They were just afraid, and fear could be overcome. Over the next month, Tommy and I built a partnership. We met in secret, sharing information, building a map of the Cole empire. I told him everything I remembered from my marriage, every suspicious transaction, every strange conversation, every name I had seen on documents I should not have been reading. He told me what he had learned from 18 months of investigation. The scale of Marcus's crimes was even larger than I had suspected. Money laundering for foreign investors, bribes to city officials, threats and intimidation against anyone who got in his way. And Tommy told me something else. The reason his story had been changed. His editor had altered it without permission, added quotes. Tommy never said, framed things in ways that made me look like a scorned woman rather than a legitimate source. Tommy had confronted him about it and been told the paper had received pressure from above. The Coles had gotten to his publication too. Tommy said he was sorry. He said he had trusted the wrong people, and I had paid the price. I told him I understood. I told him I had trusted the wrong people too. Something shifted between us that day. Not romance, not yet, but trust. The beginning of something that might become more. Then we got the break we had been waiting for. A woman contacted me through my firm's old website, the one I still paid to maintain, even though the business was essentially dead. She said her name was Patricia Walsh. She said she used to work for Marcus Cole as his executive assistant. She said she had information that could destroy him. And she was finally ready to share it. Patricia Walsh was 43 years old and terrified. We met in a parking garage at midnight because she was too scared to be seen with me anywhere else. She kept looking over her shoulder, jumping at every sound, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her coffee. She was thin, too thin, with dark circles under her eyes and gray streaks in her hair that looked new. She looked like a woman who had not slept properly in years. Patricia said she had worked for Marcus for 7 years. She had handled his schedule, his correspondence, his secrets. She had been the invisible woman in the corner. The one who saw everything, because no one thought she mattered. She knew everything. And what she knew was damning. She told me about the real money laundering operation, not the fake evidence Jessica had planted, but the actual system Marcus used to move money. Offshore accounts in the Caymans, shell companies in Delaware, construction projects that existed only on paper. She told me about the bribes to city officials, thousands of dollars in cash delivered to councilmen and planning board members who approved Marcus's developments. She told me about the threats to competitors, the harassment campaigns against journalists, the people who had been intimidated into silence. She told me about Victoria's embezzlement from the family foundation, millions of dollars over decades, skimmed from charity donations and funneled into personal accounts. Money that was supposed to help homeless shelters and children's hospitals had instead bought Victoria's jewelry and funded her trips to Europe. And she told me something else, something that made me understand why she was so afraid. Patricia said there was a woman before me, another wife, a woman named Sarah. I asked what happened to her. Patricia's face went pale. Patricia said Sarah disappeared. One day, she was there, the next she was gone. Marcus told everyone she had left him, moved to Europe, wanted to start over. The divorce was quick and quiet, handled by lawyers who asked no questions. But Patricia had seen things. Late-night meetings between Marcus and Victoria, documents being shredded, a generous payment to a man whose name she did not recognize. She said she did not have proof, but she believed Sarah Cole was dead, and she believed the family had something to do with it. I felt cold, actually cold, like the temperature in the parking garage had dropped 20 degrees. I asked her why she was telling me this now, after all these years. Patricia said she was dying. Cancer. The doctors had given her 6 months, maybe less. She said she had kept their secrets because she was afraid, but she was not afraid anymore. She said she wanted to do one good thing before she died. She wanted the truth to come out. She said she had evidence, financial records, internal communications, recordings she had made without anyone's knowledge. Everything I needed to take them down. She had kept copies hidden for years, stored in a safe deposit box under a fake name. Insurance, she called it. Protection against the day when Marcus decided she knew too much. She said she would give me everything, but she needed time to retrieve it. A few days to get her affairs in order, to make sure her sister would be taken care of after she was gone. We agreed to meet again in 3 days. Same place, same time. I drove home that night feeling something I had not felt in months. Hope. Real, genuine hope. 3 days later, I arrived at the parking garage 20 minutes early. I wanted to be there when Patricia arrived. I wanted to make sure nothing went wrong. She never came. I waited for 2 hours. I called the number she had given me. No answer. I texted. No response. The next morning, I saw the news. Patricia Walsh, 43, had been found dead in her apartment. The police were calling it suicide, prescription medication overdose. A note had been found, though they did not release its contents. Her apartment had been ransacked, drawers emptied, files scattered, computer missing. I knew it was not suicide. I knew they had killed her. And I knew they had gotten the evidence before I could. I called Tommy. He had seen the news too. Tommy said we needed to be careful. He said if they had killed Patricia, they would not hesitate to do the same to us. I told him I did not care anymore. I told him they had taken everything from me. My marriage, my baby, my business, my reputation, my freedom. Now they had taken the one person who could have helped me end this. I told him I was done being careful. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. Then he said there was one person left who might help us, one person who had access to everything and who might want out. I asked him who. Tommy said, Jessica Manning. I told him he was crazy, but he was also right. I met Jessica Manning in a hotel room downtown. She had chosen the location, a boutique hotel in the financial district, where the rooms cost $500 a night, and the staff were paid to forget faces. She was waiting when I arrived, sitting in an armchair by the window, looking out at the city below. She looked different than I remembered. Thinner, paler. The confidence I had seen in Victoria's living room 3 years ago was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. She did not stand when I entered. She did not apologize for what she had done to me. She did not explain or justify or make excuses. She simply laid out her situation with the cold precision of the lawyer she was. Jessica said she had made a mistake. She said, when she first discovered Marcus's crimes, she thought she could use the information to her advantage. She thought she was smarter than them. She thought she could secure her position, maybe even take over his business eventually. She said she had underestimated Victoria. Victoria had been playing this game for 40 years. She had seen what Jessica was doing before Jessica even finished doing it. Within months, Victoria had assembled evidence of Jessica's involvement in the money laundering. Emails, documents, recordings, carefully manufactured to make Jessica look like the mastermind. If Jessica ever tried to expose Marcus, she would go to prison. If she ever tried to leave, the evidence would be released. She was trapped in a relationship she hated, with a man she despised, controlled by a woman she feared. I asked her why I should believe any of this. Jessica laughed, and it was the most bitter sound I had ever heard. Jessica said I should not believe her. She said she would not believe herself if she were me. But she said I could verify everything she was telling me. She handed me a folder. Inside were documents, bank records, communications, real evidence, not the planted fakes from Marcus's office. She said this was a sample, proof that she was telling the truth. If I agreed to work with her, she would give me everything. I asked her what she wanted in return. Jessica said she wanted immunity. She wanted me to help her negotiate a deal with federal prosecutor. She would testify against Marcus and Victoria in exchange for protection from prosecution. I told her I was not a prosecutor. I could not guarantee anything. Jessica said she knew that, but she also knew I had connections. Diane Crawford had spent 30 years at the FBI. Tommy Reeves had sources in every law enforcement agency in the country. She said together, we could make it happen. I looked at the documents in my hands. I thought about Patricia Walsh, dead in her apartment. I thought about my baby, lost before it ever had a chance to live. I thought about the word worthless echoing in my ears for 3 years. I thought about working with the woman who had helped destroy my marriage. I told Jessica I needed time to think. She said I did not have time. Marcus was planning to announce his candidacy for Senate in 2 weeks. Once that happened, he would have political protection. His connections would shield him from any investigation. I had 2 weeks to decide. I took the documents to Diane. She analyzed them for 3 days, comparing them against everything we already knew about Marcus's operation. When she finished, she looked at me with an expression I could not read. Diane said the documents were real, authentic. They showed exactly what Jessica claimed they showed. She said, with this evidence, we could destroy Marcus Cole completely. Not just his business, but his political ambitions, his reputation, everything. But she also warned me. Diane said Jessica was smart and desperate. Desperate people did desperate things. There was still a chance this was another trap, a more elaborate one, designed to bring us down permanently. I asked her what she thought I should do. Diane was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I will never forget. Diane said sometimes you have to take risks that terrify you. She said the difference between people who win and people who lose is not that winners never face impossible choices. It is that winners make the choice anyway and deal with the consequences. She said I had already lost everything. I had nothing left to lose. I called Jessica that night. I told her I was in. Marcus Cole announced his Senate candidacy at a fundraiser for domestic abuse survivors. The irony was almost beautiful in its cruelty. I watched the live stream from Tommy's apartment, surrounded by documents and evidence and plans for destruction. 500 of Boston's most powerful people had paid $10,000 each to hear Marcus Cole talk about protecting women from the men who hurt them. He stood at the podium in his perfectly tailored suit, his silver-touched hair gleaming under the lights, his smile practiced and warm. He looked like exactly what he was pretending to be. A good man, a family man, a man who cared about the vulnerable. He spoke about his mother, Victoria, who had survived a difficult marriage with grace and dignity. He spoke about the importance of family, of commitment, of standing by the people you love. He did not mention me. But halfway through his speech, he started talking about mental health, about addiction, about the tragedy of watching someone you care about spiral into darkness. He said he had experienced this firsthand. He said his ex-wife had struggled with substance abuse and paranoid delusions. He said he had tried to help her, but some people could not be helped. He said he had eventually had to make the painful decision to end their marriage for his own well-being. He said he had learned from that experience. He said it had taught him compassion for the broken, the lost, the struggling. The crowd applauded. He had turned my destruction into his redemption story. My arrest, the planted drugs, the viral video. He was using all of it to make himself look like a saint. Tommy put his hand on my shoulder. Tommy said this was good. He said the higher they built him up, the harder he would fall. I did not feel good. I felt sick, but I also felt something else. Determination. Cold, hard, absolute determination. We were ready. Jessica had given us everything. Thousands of pages of documents proving Marcus's crimes, financial records, emails, recordings, evidence that would hold up in any court. Diane had organized it into a case that any prosecutor would love to take. She had contacts at the FBI who were already interested. Tommy had written the story that would destroy Marcus's reputation. Every detail verified, every source protected, every accusation supported by documentary evidence. All we needed was the right moment. I chose the shareholders' meeting. Cole Properties was a publicly traded company. Once a year, Marcus stood in front of his investors and told them how successful he was. This year, that meeting fell 3 weeks after his Senate announcement. It would be broadcast live, as always. Media would be present, as always, and this year, there would be an unexpected addition to the agenda. The night before the meeting, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The girl from Kentucky who thought she had found her fairy tale. The wife who ignored every warning sign because she wanted to believe in love. The woman who signed away her dignity for $50,000 and a used car. That woman was gone. She had died in a hospital bed, holding the ghost of a baby she would never meet. She had died in a jail cell, framed for crimes she did not commit. She had died 100 times over 3 years. and each time, something harder had risen in her place. Tomorrow, I would finally become the woman I was always meant to be. Tommy called me at midnight. Tommy said he wanted me to know something. He said, whatever happened tomorrow, he was proud to have known me. He said I was the bravest person he had ever met. I told him I was not brave. I told him I was just too angry to stop. Tommy laughed. Tommy said that was the same thing. The shareholders' meeting started at 9 in the morning. I arrived at 8:30 wearing a suit that cost $3,000 and carrying a briefcase full of evidence. Diane's contacts had provided credentials identifying me as a representative of a major institutional investor. Security let me through without a second glance. I found a seat in the back and waited. The room filled slowly. Investors in expensive suits, journalists with cameras and notebooks, board members taking their places at the long table on stage. Marcus arrived at 9:15, surrounded by assistants and lawyers. He looked confident, powerful, completely in control. He shook hands with board members, posed for photographs, smiled at everyone like he owned the world. Victoria was there too, sitting in the front row in her pearls and cream-colored suit. She looked like a queen surveying her domain. Jessica was not present. She was somewhere safe, protected by federal marshals who were very interested in what she had to say. Marcus took the stage at 9:20. He talked about record profits, successful developments, expansion into new markets. He talked about his Senate campaign and how it would bring positive attention to the company. He talked about the future, about growth, about all the wonderful things that were coming. Then I stood up. I said I had a question. Everyone turned to look at me. 500 investors, a dozen journalists, Marcus Cole himself. He did not recognize me at first. Why would he? I was not the broken woman who had signed those divorce papers. I was not the hysterical ex-wife from the viral video. I was someone entirely different. Then he looked closer, and I watched his face change. Marcus said, "Elena." He said it like a curse. I said, I had a question about the company's financial statements. I said, I had noticed some irregularities I wanted him to explain. Before he could respond, I started walking toward the front of the room. I pulled documents from my briefcase and handed them to the nearest journalist. I said these documents showed that Cole Properties had been laundering money through shell companies for over a decade. I said they showed bribes to city officials, fraud against investors, and tax evasion on a massive scale. The room erupted. Marcus tried to take control. He said I was a disturbed woman with a vendetta. He said I had already been exposed as a liar and a criminal. He said security should remove me immediately, but I was not done. I said I had one more thing. I said this document showed that Victoria Cole had been embezzling from the family foundation for 30 years. Millions of dollars stolen from charities, from causes she claimed to support, from the vulnerable people she pretended to help. Victoria, sitting in the front row, went pale. For the first time since I had known her, she looked afraid. I said I had witnesses. I said I had evidence. I said the FBI would be very interested in everything I had found. Then I looked directly at Marcus. I said he once called me a worthless loser. I said he told me I brought nothing to our marriage. I said I wanted to thank him. I said his cruelty had shown me who I really was. His dismissal had freed me to become something he could never have imagined. I said I was not worthless. I had never been worthless. I said he was about to find out exactly how much I was worth. Then I walked out. Behind me, I heard chaos, shouting, questions, the sound of a carefully constructed empire beginning to crumble. Tommy's story broke online an hour later. Within 2 hours, it was the top story on every news site in the country. By the end of the day, Marcus Cole's political career was over. By the end of the week, The FBI had opened a formal investigation. By the end of the month, Marcus and Victoria Cole had been indicted on 47 counts of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Chapter 15. Justice and Beyond. The trial lasted 3 months. I attended every day. I sat in the gallery and watched as prosecutors presented evidence I had helped gather. I watched as witnesses I had helped find testified about crimes that had gone unpunished for decades. I watched as Marcus's lawyers tried every trick in the book to discredit the evidence, to attack the witnesses, to spin the narrative in their client's favor. It did not work. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found Marcus Cole guilty on 47 counts. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison. I was in the courtroom when they led him away in handcuffs. He looked at me as he passed, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Not anger, not hatred, recognition. He finally understood who I was, who I had always been. I smiled at him. I did not say a word. Victoria Cole faced her own charges. The foundation embezzlement, combined with evidence of her involvement in covering up Marcus's crimes, resulted in multiple indictments. Her lawyers negotiated a plea deal that kept her out of prison due to her age and health. But she was stripped of everything. Her money, her status, her carefully cultivated reputation. The last I heard, she was living in a small apartment in Florida, abandoned by the society friends who had once fought for invitations to her parties. Some fates are worse than prison. Jessica Manning testified and received immunity as promised. She entered witness protection and disappeared. I never saw her again. I cannot say I was sorry to see her go. As for me, I built something from the ashes. Ward and Associates became the most respected forensic accounting firm in the country. We specialized in helping women uncover hidden assets, expose financial abuse, and find justice against men who thought money made them untouchable. I hired Patricia Walsh's sister as our office manager. It felt right somehow, a way of honoring the woman who had tried to help me and paid with her life. I wrote a book, The Exit Fund, Financial Survival for Women. It spent 32 weeks on the bestseller list. I speak at conferences, at shelters, at law schools. I tell my story to anyone who will listen, because I know there are other women out there who feel as trapped and hopeless as I once did. I want them to know it is possible to survive. It is possible to fight back. It is possible to win. Tommy and I got married 2 years after the trial ended. A small ceremony, just close friends and family. Rachel was my maid of honor. Her twins, now 10 years old, served as ring bearers. Diane gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. She said she had never been prouder of anyone in her life. She said I was proof that the best revenge was not destruction. It was becoming the person your enemies never wanted you to be. Tommy's daughter Lily was our flower girl. She is 11 now and wants to be a journalist like her father. She says she wants to catch bad guys and tell the truth. I tell her that is exactly what she should do. We bought a house outside the city, big enough for the family we are building. Tommy writes his investigations from a home office. I run my firm from downtown, but make sure I am home for dinner every night. Some mornings, I wake up and cannot believe this is my life. There is a painting in my living room. The small watercolor I was looking at when I first met Marcus Cole. The one of the woman standing at the window, looking out at the storm. I bought it at auction after his conviction. It cost $300,000, money I could easily afford. I keep it as a reminder, not of him, of the woman I was before I lost myself. The woman who loved art, who had dreams, who believed she deserved good things. She is still here. She survived everything. 6 months after the trial ended, I received a letter. It came from the federal prison where Victoria Cole was briefly held before her transfer to house arrest. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakable. She wrote that she knew I had something, evidence I had not used during the trial, information about Marcus's father and how he really died. I did have that evidence. Patricia had given me everything, including documents suggesting that Victoria had poisoned her husband when she learned he was planning to divorce her and leave his fortune to charity. I had chosen not to use it, not to protect Marcus, not to protect Victoria. I had chosen not to use it because some doors, once opened, cannot be closed, because some revelations destroy everyone they touch, and because I wanted to end the cycle, not continue it. Victoria wrote that she did not understand why I had shown mercy. She said she would never have done the same, but she wanted to tell me something in return. She wrote about Sarah, Marcus's first wife, the one before me. She told me to look into what really happened to her. She told me to ask Marcus why there were no photographs of Sarah anywhere in the house. She told me to find out why Sarah's family had stopped speaking to the Coles decades ago. She wrote some families have more than one secret. I showed the letter to Tommy. He read it twice, then looked at me with an expression I could not identify. Tommy asked what I wanted to do. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about the woman I had been 3 years ago, consumed by rage, willing to do anything for revenge. I thought about everything I had sacrificed, everything I had lost, everything I had gained. I thought about the life I had now, the husband who loved me, the stepdaughter who called me Mom, the work that gave my suffering meaning. I thought about opening another investigation, digging into another Cole family secret, spending more years of my life hunting ghosts. Then I thought about something Diane had told me once. She said the hardest part of fighting powerful people was knowing when to stop. She said some battles were worth fighting forever, but some battles had already been won, and the smartest thing you could do was enjoy the victory. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I told Tommy I did not know yet. I told him I needed time to think. But deep down, I think I already knew the answer. I had spent 3 years fighting to reclaim my life from people who tried to destroy me. I had won. Marcus was in prison. Victoria was ruined. My firm was successful. My family was happy. Sarah Cole, whoever she was, whatever had happened to her, deserved justice. But there would always be another victim, another secret, another fight. At some point, you have to decide that enough is enough. You have to choose to live your life instead of constantly battling for it. I made that choice. I am not the woman Marcus Cole called worthless. I am not the woman Victoria dismissed as common. I am not the victim Jessica tried to frame. I am Elena Ward Reeves. I survived, I fought, I won, and whatever comes next, I will face it the same way I faced everything else. On my own terms, with my own strength, in my own time. That is the real revenge. Not destruction, not humiliation, not watching your enemies suffer. The real revenge is becoming everything they said you could not be. The real revenge is building a life so full that the people who tried to break you become nothing more than a distant memory. I am living proof, and my story, the story they tried so hard to end, is just beginning. If this story touched something inside you, if you felt Elena's pain and celebrated her victory, if you know someone who needs to hear that they are worth more than they have been told, then I have a small favor to ask. Hit that subscribe button. Not for me. For the woman in your life who is going through something right now and thinks she is alone. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you would have done in Elena's situation. Tell me about a time when someone underestimated you and you proved them wrong. Share this video with one person who needs to hear it today. You never know whose life you might change with a single click. And if you want more stories of women who refuse to stay broken, who turn their pain into power and their setbacks into comebacks, make sure you turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Remember, your comeback is always bigger than your setback. I will see you in the next story. Closing disclaimer. Final note. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.